methods had worked in 1927 were likely to still be effective today. Unless, of course, a person was dealing with some newly developed, computerized horse. And there was nothing about Bob or Nellie that suggested this was the case. The harness he'd bought at auction was dried out and brittle, but mostly salvageable. Virgil had cleaned the leather with saddle soap and then lubricated it with mink oil. The hardware was brass and had shined up nicely. He'd first hitched the animals up singly, walking them around the barnyard, getting them used to stopping and going, and turning one way or the other. Neither seemed at all accustomed to the harness, which may have been different from the setup they were used to, but they did appear to recognize the prompts: whoa to stop, giddy up to go, and haw and gee to turn left and right. The author, Smith, made note of the fact that in England the commands for turning were reversed. Intending to keep to Ulster County, or at the very least to the confines of North America, Virgil saw no reason to burden Bob and Nellie with that information. The first time he'd put the horses in tandem, a week ago, Bob had headed left for the water trough just as Nellie was turning right, and Bob's pole strap snapped in half. Virgil took the complete harness into Jake Norsworthy that day and told him to replace whatever was needed. The leather shop was on the west edge of town, a half-mile off 212. Virgil walked in to find Jake talking to a young blonde woman who was holding a western saddle in both arms as if it were a newborn lamb. The woman's long hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore tight jeans and cowboy boots, and a T-shirt with a silkscreen of Dwight Yoakam across the front. "Merle Sanders said she came into Kettle and Crock for breakfast this morning, and was just as nice as could be," the woman was saying. Virgil nodded past the woman to Jake. "I've heard that about her," Jake said, returning Virgil's nod. The young woman hadn't heard Virgil come in, and she turned to see him now, the ponytail whipping around her neck. "Olivia Burns is in town," she announced. "I see," Virgil said. "The movie actress," Jake elaborated. Virgil nodded again, trying to think of something to say that might suggest some interest in the subject on his part. He couldn't come up with a damn thing. "So, my harness is ready?" he asked. From the saddlery, he drove to the co-op, where he bought a couple of rolls of binder twine, enough to finish the season. The girl working the cash register was maybe 16, a high school student, no doubt. When she gave Virgil his change, she told him that Olivia Burns was in town. Back at the farm, Virgil pulled the hay wagon from the drive shed. Earlier that month, he'd removed the steel tongue from the wagon and replaced it with a double whippletree of chain and oak. Taking a couple of nylon leads from a peg on the wall, he walked into the front field to retrieve the 2 draft horses, and then he led them to the wagon, where he fitted them both with Sweeney collars and the double harness. He hooked them to the hay wagon, and when he said, "Giddy up," Bob and Nellie did just that. Once in the hayfield, it took a while to get the timing down, although that was Virgil's fault as much as the horses'. He was every bit as green at this as they were, and maybe more so. The pace was the tricky thing. The team needed to walk slowly enough that Virgil had time to toss the hay bales onto the wagon without falling behind. The problem came at the end of the field, when the horses turned back toward the barn. Heading for home, they immediately sped up, at one point breaking into a trot. Virgil had to grab the reins and slow them to a walk. Every few minutes, he woed the team and jumped up onto the wagon to build the load. After an hour or so, things fell into a rhythm. By the time the first wagon was full, Bob and Nellie were working fairly well, as if there existed in them some sort of muscle memory from their plowing days. Virgil left that load by the barn, shifted horses and harness to an empty wagon, and went back into the field. The heat was oppressive, but there was a breeze from the east that made working tolerable. When the third wagon was loaded, it was nearly supper time. As Virgil led the wagon and team around the barn and into the yard, he saw Claire sitting on the side porch of the house, drinking a bottle of beer and watching him with an amused expression on her face, as if Virgil were an 8-year-old who had managed to cobble together a go-kart that actually rolled. Virgil unhooked the team and led them into the pasture field, where he rubbed them down quickly with a gunny sack and then rewarded them both with a bucket of grain. Claire's expression remained virtually unchanged as he made his way to the house. She was wearing khaki pants and a white cotton shirt, the sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her dark hair fell loosely on her shoulders. She was tanned and relaxed
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.